date.
Also Professor of Poetry, one of the highest accolades really a poet can receive in Britain, which was a superb decision on the university's part. So please welcome to the stage Simon Arnold.
Time in the brain cells, sweating like a nail bum, trouble with a heartbeat, spitting like a stain gun, cut to the chase, pick up the pace, no such thing as a walkabout fun run, shoot yourself a glance in the chrome in the day room, don't hang about, you're running out of space, son. Red light, stop sign, belly full of road rage, ticket from the fuzz if your dog in the slow lane, pull up your socks, get out of the blocks, 12-hour day shift grafting at the coal face, turning up the gas brings blood to the boat race, stoked, track the iron, or you're sleeping in the Stone Age. Don't dilly-dally or the trail grows closer. Don't hold back till you mouldy old doser. Spring for the line, turn on a dime. Sit tight, hang fire and put you on hold, sir. Too late, snail's base already sold, sir. Blame it on the kids, but it's you getting old, sir. Shortcut, fast track, trolley dash it quick, safe. 4-minute warning, boil yourself an egg, babe. Crack the whip, shoot from the hip. Close shave, tear ass, riding on a knife blade. 24/7 in the brain drain, rat race, finger on the pulse, but you better watch your heart rate. Cheap thrill, speed kills, pop yourself a pill, mate. Thumb a free ride on amphetamine sulfate. Run with the pack, don't look back. Pedal to the flow when you're burning up the home straight. Varying doses and when you're getting home late. Love's in the freezer and your dinner's in the dog grate. 10 to the dozen to the grave from the carry-cot. Bold like a thoroughbred, talk like a chatterbox. Oil the wheels, pick up your heels. Ginseng tea turns out to be Tommy Rock. Reach for the future with a handful of liver spots. Fuse wire burns in the barrel of a body clock. Cut yourself in half doing life at the sharp end. Meet your own self coming back around the U-bend. Get with the beat, turn up the heat. Sink like a stone by going off the deep end. 50 quid an hour for a top flight. Shrink said start killing time. It's later than you think. Documentary films for BBC and Channel 4 sometimes, and a number of years ago now we made a film called The Not Dead, which is about soldiers who've been in various conflicts on behalf of Britain over a number of years. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. In the old days, we probably would have called this shell shock, and that's the phrase that we often use when we're describing things that happened to the poets of the First World War. But these were people who'd done their military service in lots of different places overseas, and the real war had started for them when they came home. They couldn't reintegrate with their families, couldn't get on with their jobs. Quite often their heads were full of images that they couldn't get rid of. And I wrote this next poem for that film for a guy called Eddie, who'd been a peacekeeper in Bosnia. And because he was a peacekeeper, he wasn't allowed to intervene in situations, which is what he was trained to do as a soldier. So he had to stand there and watch while some really atrocious things happened around him. And I think this, more than anything, had really messed up his head. And he came home after that, and just struggled to get on with home life, and was always on the edge of a nervous breakdown. At some point in his military career, he'd been shot in the side of his face. A bullet had ricocheted off something else, had struck him in the side of the face, and it had carried on, sort of rebounding around him. It ended up somewhere down here. And when his wife started talking about this wound, she described it as if it were the most intimate place on his whole body. It was the last place that he wanted anybody to touch, and it was the last thing that he wanted to talk about. And when Laura, his wife, described the journey of this bullet, she described it in very loving terms, as if she were trying to do something incredibly delicate and sensitive, almost as if she were following the thread that led to something very explosive, as if she were trying to diffuse him, because he was like a bomb that would go off all the time. So this poem was written about his wound, but in her voice, and she read the poem in the film. I suppose another thing that I was trying to do here was to give voice to the mothers and the sisters and the daughters and the wives and the women who get dragged into conflict, not always on the front line, but have still got a role in it and still feel the effects of it. So the poem's called The Manhunt. After the first phase, after passionate nights and intimate days, only then would he let me trace the frozen river which ran through his face. Only then would he let me explore the blown hinge of his lower jaw, and handle and hold the damaged porcelain collarbone, and mind and attend the fractured rudder of shoulder blade, and finger and thumb the parachute silk of his punctured lung. Only then could I bind the struts and climb the rungs of his broken ribs, and feel the hurt of his grazed heart. Skirting along, only then could I picture the scan, the fetus of metal beneath his chest, where the bullet had finally come to rest. Then I widened the search, traced the scarring back to its source, to a sweating, unexploded mine buried deep in his mind, around which every nerve in his body had tightened and closed. Then, and only then, did I come close. I don't know whether at school or in an exam situation you're still encouraged to make connections between form and content in a poem. I always think it's pretty good fun making an association between how a poem is presented physically and what it's trying to articulate. And that poem's a good example of that. So it's written in couplets because it's a poem about two people. It's about partnership, about a relationship. And if you look at the end words of each couplet, sometimes they rhyme and sometimes they can't quite manage it. They're often, it's like hurt and heart. They're half rhymes or para rhymes or near rhymes or off rhymes or close rhymes. I don't know what you call them this week. But they can't quite manage to chime together. And in using that, in choosing that form, I was trying to describe something of their relationship. They wanted to harmonise, but they didn't always make it. This next poem is more autobiographical. When I finally left home, I didn't really get very far. I only got about 6 doors down the road to a rented house. And my mum, being my mum, followed me down the street as I was moving. And she was coming with me to help measure up for carpets and curtains and things like that. She brought this tape measure with her. And while we were in the house had been empty for a long time, so it was very damp. And I'd gone up into the attic to open a skylight. This is a window up in the roof space, just to let some air and some light through the house. And I'd taken the tape measure with me, or at least I'd taken one end of it. Because when I looked back down through the stairwell in the house, my mum was stood at the bottom, holding on to the other end. And even though I didn't really think about it at the time, it didn't really register at that moment, when I came to remember it so many years later, it struck me as an image for apron strings. I don't know whether you've ever heard that phrase, but it's quite often used to describe, I think, particularly the relationship between a mother and a son, this sort of tie, this bond that can stretch infinitely long and very thin, that somehow always keeps you together and connected. So in this poem, I'm positioning myself